Yep, I just started the recording, so feel free to get stuff rolling.
Okay, well, Haley and Madison, welcome tonight to the GRE Prep. My name is Keith Dreiling. I'm the chair of the Department of Mathematics and the Department of Computer Science. I've done these preparations for the last several years, not to teach content, because there's really no way of teaching content here in an hour and a half, which we won't even really spend that much time. But I do want to show you materials available to practice for the GRE, and some instructional videos that are out there also that are within the website. And so let me share a screen with you. This is the ets.org website. So make sure if you want to get to these materials, go to ets.org, and then go down to GRE. And then scroll down, and you can see where to register and things like that. But if you scroll down to prepare for the GRE general test, learn more. On this screen, we have on the left-hand side, you can see where we can prepare for the different types of tests. We'll be talking mostly about quantitative reasoning. Also, there's a power prep that I want to talk about with the practice tests and the materials for that. I'm really going to talk quite a bit about the general test preparations, the free things that we have right here online. And I think that's all for this page. I believe so. So what I want to do, let me click on the free preparation materials first. We're going to see some of this information pop up again as we go through. And let me click on quantitative reasoning, which, like I said, I think I could have done that right over here too. On this page, I'm really focusing on quantitative reasoning, this part right here, most of this. Notice the types of tests that you'll be taking. So what I want to do is show you where the materials are for preparation, what's available for you as far as explanation and practice problems, and then the types of questions. I'll run through each one of these, which will look very similar in format on what you're going to see. But here are the different types of questions on the test. There's quantitative comparison, multiple choice where you select one choice, multiple choice where you select one or more, numeric entry, data interpretation of sets, and then, or data interpretation sets, and then some other information about problem solving and using the calculator. I'll also talk about the power prep information that's available for you. If you have questions anywhere this evening, feel free to interrupt, turn your microphone on and say something, or go into the chat, and I'll try to pay attention to the chat so I can answer those questions. And if not, once I get done with the whole presentation, if you want to save your questions for then, that's fine with me too. So let me go into, and actually there's some explanation here. I won't read through it, but you can see this different information that they give you. I do want to say something before I forget. I said that I won't be able to do content tonight, and there's a little bit you might find out from tonight on content, but that's more just because of the types of problems. But if you want some more explanation, I think I'll start with this. Go to the Khan Academy instructional videos. I don't know if you're familiar with Khan Academy, but they have some pretty good materials out there, videos just in all levels of mathematics. But here's what you'll see in the Khan Academy information. You'll see some of the topics on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the different links that you can click on. For example, let me just go down to this Algebra 1, quadratic equations and functions. And within this website, they have videos that explain topics pretty well. They also have some practice questions and even some like short quizzes that you can take or little assignments that you can take. And if you do well enough, then you can go to the next level. But it's really at your own pace. It's whatever you want to do. But for example, in this Khan Academy, here in this part of the screen, Parabola's intro, if you click on the button or click on Parabola's intro, it'll bring up a video.
In this video, we're going to talk about one of the most common types of curves you will see in mathematics, and that is the parabola. And the word parabola sounds quite fancy, but we'll see it's describing something that is fairly straightforward.
Okay, so we have a video, and then on the right-hand side, let me move some of the screen here. On the right-hand side, there are some questions that you may or may not do, but if you do start the questions, it'll give you some questions asking you, different information. You can check your answers, and it'll tell you if you're right or wrong. So here they say draw the parabola's axis of symmetry, and if we move our line to show that and check, it'll tell us if we're right or wrong. And we can go to the next question and continue on. So there is some practice practice for the concepts, as well as the videos to help explain concepts. And you can take advantage of that all that you want. So let me go back to where I was a little while. Well, let me go back a little further.
And you said to have access to this website prep stuff, we have to sign up for the test first?
No, actually for this website, you just type in ets.org, and this is all free. I'll tell you more about the Power Prep, which you can only get into if you register. But this is all free. This is out there for you. And in fact, if when we're done with the presentation, if you want to get on and play around with it a little while, I can stick around for questions if you want, just so you can play around with it and see that you can navigate it okay.
Sweet.
So let me go back. Here I'm back on the page with the different types of tests that are available, or not available, but the different types of questions that will be on the test. So let me run through those. Here is something that you're going to see that's pretty typical of what you'll see for each one of these types of questions. At the top, it tells you what type of test question you're looking at, quantitative comparison questions. There's an introduction, which is we're on now, and then there are sample questions, which I'll click on and we'll look at a few of those questions. What's nice about this information is that the introduction will give you a description of what you're really doing with these types of questions, and then some tips for you. And for example, the description tells you that you're going to compare two quantities, quantity A and B, and you're going to answer if quantity A is greater, if B is greater, if they're equal, or if you cannot determine which one is greater. So it tells you what the questions are like. And then for the tips, and we're going to see some of these tips come up later with the problem-solving steps to some extent. But become familiar with the answer choices. Look at all of them, make sure you understand what they are. Sometimes the answer might jump out at you a little bit more quickly. Sometimes you'll really have to work the problem before anything will come out to you. Or the second one, and avoid unnecessary computations. Sometimes we get to doing too much work when we don't have to do quite as much work. And it's kind of easy to say that, but we don't always see a quick, easy way of doing things until it's too late. But anyway, there are times where you don't have to do a lot of work, and you'll see that in some of the problems, the practice problems. Remember that geometric figures are not necessarily drawn to scale. We'll see that in one of the problems. So we can't just measure, get out a ruler or something and measure, because they're not really to scale. We have to go by the given information to tell what's really true. Plug in numbers. This is a decent strategy all the way through. If we don't know how to solve something, if we don't really know a good procedure to follow, we may be able to take numbers and plug them in to the expressions and see if we can tell what's true or not, or what's which one is true as far as which one's greater or not. However, that can take time, and if we don't try enough different cases, we may not really see what's going on with the problem. Simplify the comparison. This is probably mostly algebraic type manipulation. And if we can simplify, then we might be able to see the answers more clearly. So those are just some tips for what you might want to do in solving the problems. Let's look at some questions. So here are the instructions. You're going to compare quantities. Which one is greater, A or B, or they're equal, or we can't tell. So here's an example, and we won't do all of them, but I just want to look at a couple of them. Quantity A is the least prime number greater than 24, and quantity B is the greatest prime number less than 28. And we want to know which one's greater. And what's nice is if you can try to work the problem before you look at the explanation, but then eventually go down and check the explanation and get see which answer is correct. But it gives you a pretty good explanation on most of these, even though there may be different ways of solving the problem. Sometimes a better way of solving the problem than what they might show you, at least for different individuals. But it says for the integers greater than 24, note that 25, 26, 27, and 28 are not prime numbers, but 29 is, as well as 31 and so on. We want the least prime number greater than 24. Looks like that number is going to be 29. For the integers less than 28, the prime number, or the numbers are 27, 26, 25, 24, which are not prime, but 23 is. And again, prime prime numbers are numbers that can only be divided by 1 in themselves. Like 24 has other factors like 4 times 6 and 3 times 8 and so on, so it's not prime. But 23 is prime, as well as much smaller numbers like 19 and so on. Thus, 23 is the answer for 28, or for quantity B. Therefore, which one is greater? Quantity A, being 29, is greater than 23, which is quantity B. So that's what you're answering on, something like that. Looking at another example, Lionel is younger than Maria. And quantity A is twice Lionel's age, and quantity B is Maria's age. Which one is greater, or can we even tell? Well, here, they're trying some example, or trying some, sample numbers. Let's say that Lionel is 6 and Maria is 10, so he's younger than Maria. That's what the statement said. So they're just making up numbers of 6 and 10. Then quantity A is greater because twice his age is going to be 12 and hers is only 10. So A would be greater. But what if his age is only 4 and hers is 10? Then quantity B is greater. His would be 8 for 2 times 4, and hers and quantity B is 10. So that means that we really don't know. We can't tell from this information. So the answer D is the correct choice. Any questions on those types of problems?
None so far, thank you.
Okay. On the next one, I'm just going to quickly mention in quantity A, when they talk about 54% of 360, one of the hints said that don't do unnecessary calculations. Well, if we think of 54% being close to 50%, or 1/2 of 360 is 180. And so 54% is going to be greater than 180. So this number is greater than 180 compared to 150, shows us that A is bigger. There's a good example of not doing that whole calculation when it's really not needed. And then I wanted to show you this example that is geometric. And remember one of the tips said that the geometric figures are not drawn to scale. And so we can't really tell for sure, which segments are longer just from the picture. All that we can tell from this is that PQ, from what they tell us here, PQ and PR are congruent to one another. They're equal in length. That's what we do know. It looks like QS and QR might be equal, but we don't know that from the picture because we can't go by looks of it. We have to go by information that's given to us. And they wanted to know which one is bigger, PS or SR. And if we, so I go down here a little bit further, if we change where S is, now remember, the way they drew that made it look like QS and QR are the same. It also made it look like PS and SR are both the same, but the picture, nothing was said about where S really is. So S could have different locations, which means we really don't know from that information which answer is correct, or which quantity is greater. So answer D is correct. And then on the last one, just to show what they did on this problem, here's an equation. They want to know which is bigger, X or Y. And it looks like, again, they're just trying some numbers to see what happens. They plugged in 0 and they got -3. So -3, so X is bigger at 0 is bigger than -3. But if X is 1, then we get 6. And so in that case, Y is greater than X. So again, the correct answer is D. Now, when you plug in numbers, it can be a little tricky because you could try a whole bunch of them that all have the same properties and you really don't see any difference, which may be good. It may show you that one number is greater than the other. But you do need to try a few different cases to kind of get that figured out. One case doesn't tell you necessarily what's going on. If you do plug in numbers, it's usually a good idea to plug in a 0 and then some small positive numbers like 0 or like 1 and 2 and 3 maybe, and maybe a few negative numbers. And then possibly just jump up and put a bigger number in just to see what happens. But you probably want to have a variety of at least putting 0 in, at least putting 1 and 2 in, and maybe some negatives, and then just trying some bigger numbers. But again, you don't always get a good idea of what's going on with the problem from that. And on this problem, it looks like in their solution, they're saying that Y is greater than 4. Here are two quantities, which one's greater? Well, if Y is greater than 4, we can plug some numbers in and see what's happening. But we can also, according to what they're showing, is we can do some algebra and solve a little bit. Just try to solve and see what's going on. Let's see if I can show that. It doesn't show it as well as I wanted to, but we could even like multiply both sides by 5 to get some statement and see if we can figure out what's going on between 3y plus 2 and 5y and see which one's greater than or less than. I'm going to stop with that example, let you look through the rest if you want to, and go to a different type of test. Are there any questions on the quantitative comparison questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, let's go into multiple choice. And really, you need to study up on it more and just spend time with it yourself to really get into it more, but I will run through some with you. Let's look at multiple choice. Select one answer. Again, there's an introduction. It tells the type of test, multiple choice, where you only have one answer from the list. And then it gives you the tips. Use the fact that the answer is there. There is one answer, it is there. So you can guess, do whatever you need to do for that. But the answer is there somewhere. Examine your choices. Sometimes you can narrow down your choices down to maybe 2 that make sense and 2 that don't make sense. And then that gives you a better chance of guessing if you have to guess. And then for questions that require approximations, scan the answers to see how close an approximation is needed. Sometimes you can spend more work that's necessary when an approximation is good enough. And so it helps to maybe save time by using that tip. Just look at a couple of questions. In this first problem, what's the value of x? Well, if you solve it algebraically, adding 2x to both sides would give you 7x over here, and subtracting 32 from both sides would give you negative 20 over on the right side. So you have this statement here, and if you divide both sides by 7, you get negative 4, and you have the answer right away. Now again, if you forget some of the algebra, you can plug in negative 4, see if it's true or not. If not, plug in negative 3, see if it's true or not, and so on. And you can just do some plugging in to see which one is correct. Which of the following is farthest from 1 on the number line? Here's the picture. Well, basically, you should be able to do some counting to get to the numbers that are given in the list. If you have a sketch, that's great. If not, if you make a sketch on your own, you can count that. You can also subtract. 1 minus negative 10 is going to be 11. 1 minus negative 5 is only 6 apart. 1 minus 0 is only 1 apart, and so on. And you can figure out the negative 10 is the farthest one away. In this next one, you'll need to know something about graphing and about lines and about slope. Here's the v line that comes from this equation, 2x plus 4. And in this case, the lines, these two, actually the rays, have slopes of 2 in this direction and negative 2 in this direction. And we're trying to compare all of these to see which one intersects with that v line. And it comes down to that if we have something like x minus 2, and we know that the y-intercept is negative 2, and we have a slope of 1, it's never going to intersect. Same thing with x plus 3. Here's 3, and a slope of 1 for x is going to be here. 2x minus 2 intersects down here with a slope of 2. That has the same slope as this, but they're going to be parallel. And same thing with 2x plus 3. But with 3x minus 2, we're going to have a steeper slope than the slope of 2, so eventually it's going to intersect up here, somewhere up there. So the answer should be letter E. I'm going to jump to the next test. So that's really just mostly multiple choice questions. Were there any questions on multiple choice? That's usually what most of you are familiar with as far as test taking. The next, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that I didn't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. The next one is multiple choice where you have possibly more than one answer. So now, note whether you are asked to indicate a specific number of choices or just pick all of them that apply. So if they say pick 2 of them that are correct, then you'd want 2 of them, exactly 2. If they say choose all that are correct, it could be all of them, but it could be as low as 1 of them. In some questions that involve,
if you get one of the 2 right, do you get like half credit, or is that not?
That's a good question. I believe you don't, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know how they score that. I believe that you have to get the whole question right for credit.
Okay.
But like I said, I'm not positive about that. In some questions that involve conditions that limit the possible values of the numerical answer choices, it may be efficient to determine the least and or greatest possible value. Sometimes, and this is true even with the other types of questions, or mainly the other type of multiple choice, if you know how big or small an answer is going to be, you can maybe limit yourself on what you're really focusing on for the answers, and you can eliminate some that don't even make sense. Avoid lengthy calculations by recognizing continuing numerical patterns. Again, if we can keep from doing calculations that aren't really needed, we can save time, and that'll be less stressful if you're not spending too much time and losing time on other questions. As far as some of the types of questions, And here they tell what you're supposed to be doing on this part of the test. Correct answer may just be one, maybe just one of the choices or as many of them. Oh, here it is. No credit is given unless you select all the correct answers and no others. So there, you have to be completely right or else it's wrong. The first one, talking about which two of the following numbers, so we're going to only choose two, have a product, which means multiplication of those two numbers, that's between -1 and 0, and they pretty much multiply through to get those choices. However, if you have to get a number between -1 and 0, it means it's going to be a negative number. It means you can't multiply these two numbers together to get a negative. You're going to get a positive if you multiply A and B together. Also, you're going to get a positive if you multiply C and D together. And then you also have to know what those numbers look like in fraction form. So they went ahead and multiplied out, and they found out that the only correct answer, or the correct answer, came from choices B and C. Those two numbers multiplied together will give you a negative between 0 and 1. And then the second question, which of the following integers are multiples of both 2 and 3? Notice that there's terminology involved in these questions, so you have to be maybe brush up a little bit on terminology. You know, what is a multiple? What does product mean? You know, things like that. Well, multiples of 2 and 3 would be like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 for the multiples of 2, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 for multiples of 3. They're numbers that 2 multiplies into and or divides into and 3 divides into. To indicate all of those integers that are true for both 2 and 3, if you just run down the list, 8 doesn't divide by 3, so that can't be it. 9 doesn't divide by 2, so that doesn't work. But 12 divides by both 2 and 3, so that's one of the answers. 18 also divides by 2 and 3, so that's an answer. 21 doesn't divide by 2, but 36 divides by 2 and 3. So the answers are C, D, and F. And you'd answer with all of those. I think that was the last one I wanted to talk about. Oh, no, there is another one. This is a good one. This is a really good one if you understand patterns of what's going on with a question like this. Which of the following could be the units digit, the ones digit, of 57 to the nth power, where n is some positive integer like 1 or 2 or 3? Well, that means that we could take 57 to the first power to get 57, but then we could also take 57 squared to get some big number, 57 cubed to get a bigger number, and so on. But that's going to take quite a while to multiply out, you know, those 57 times 57 times 57, you know, repeatedly. But if you think about what happens with the units digit, if I multiply, well, 57 to the first power is going to be 57, so the units digit is just 7. But if I multiply 57 times 57, the units digit is going to come from 7 to 7 times 7, which is 49. So I'm really looking just at the 9. So 57 to the second power is going to give me a 9 for the units digit. If I multiply by 57 again, I'm really just looking at 7 times 9, which is 63. I get 3 for the units digit. And if I multiply by 57 again, I'm really only looking at 7 times the 3 to get 21. I'm noticing the 1. And if I multiply by 57 again, I'm multiplying 7 times 1, which is 7. And then that pattern repeats. So the numbers that I get in the units place would be 7 from 7 to the first power. Then 7 times 7 is 49, which gives me the 9 for the units. 7 times 9 is 63. So I get the 3. 7 times 3 is 21, so I get the 1. 7 times 1 is 7 again, so I get 7. And that works out really well if you understand that pattern. And if not, you can just keep multiplying them out. You do have a calculator on there you can multiply with, so it's not going to take that much time, but yet it does take more time than if you recognize what's really important in the multiplication in that problem. Questions on multiple choice, selecting one or more choices. Okay, looking at numeric entry, here's where you're going to type in some numbers for answers. So you're going to enter an integer or a decimal in a single answer box, or a fraction in two separate boxes, one for the numerator, one for the denominator. Okay, so you're punching numbers in, so you want to be very careful how you do that. The tips on this: make sure that you answer the question that's asked. Since you have no choices to choose from, you're putting in an answer without knowing, well, unless you know how to check your answers, you don't know if you're right or wrong, or if that even makes sense or not. So be careful of that. Also, pay special attention to the units, such as feet or miles, or orders of magnitude like millions or billions, and to percents as compared with decimals. Pay attention to what's really being asked in the problem, or if something is given to you in a different scale, like 150 is in thousands, that you have 150,000, not just 150. If you're supposed to round, make sure you round to the required degree of accuracy. For example, 46.7 is to be rounded to the nearest integer, or if it is, you round it to 47. If your solution strategy involves intermediate computations, do all the computations exactly and only round your final answer. If you're rounding the answers, make sure you do all the calculations before you round. If no rounding instructions are given, then enter the exact value. And then it says, examine your answer to see if it's reasonable with respect to the information given. You may want to use estimation to see if you're even close to the answer. Let's look at a couple of questions on this part. It tells you quite a bit of how you're supposed to answer, hyphen for a negative sign, decimal point for a period, your fractions, how you're putting them in, your decimals, equivalent forms like 2.5 and 2.50 are both correct. So if you're supposed to answer like $2.50 and you just said 2.5, that would be correct. If you have 2.500, that's still correct. And there was another thing. Oh, here. I wanted to mention, it says, oh, this wasn't it. I think it's in one of the answers. Somewhere it talks about, let's say you have dollars, and oh, it's this first question. Here's where it says it. Talking about the total cost, and you're supposed to put the answer in here. They already gave you the dollar sign. You just want to type in the dollar amount, the answer amount. And so they're asking about one pen and one marker. One pen costs 25 cents and a marker costs 35. At those prices, what's the cost of 18 pens and 100 markers? And we do the multiplications and we add, and we get 39.50, which they said we can type in as 39.50 or 39.5 or 39.500 without the dollar sign, because the dollar sign is given to us already. We just want the numeric value. Second problem, we're giving a fraction for the answer. They do the work and they come out with a fraction of 20 over 80, which we could put 20 up here and 80 down here. Or we could reduce it down to 2/8 or 1/4 or 10/40ths, or whatever's going to be equivalent to this fraction. So it's nice having some of that flexibility on fraction problems. Again, there's another question with dollar sign here. We want to pay attention to, in this line here, this total sales in thousands of dollars. So this doesn't just mean 70, it means 70,000 and 150,000. Same thing down here, $41,000, $120,000. So pay attention to more information that's given to you like that. Okay, I think that's the last one I wanted to show.
You mentioned calculators earlier. Do they provide a calculator, or are we allowed to bring our own? And if so, what type?
I'm going to look down here at using the calculator, because I can't remember for sure if you can bring one in or not, but they do provide one for you. And I think this is the one that you have to use, but I can't remember for sure about that. So I'll talk about that calculator. I'll show it to you. I'll show you the information for it. You'll have to go through to become familiar with using it. It's a basic calculator, a very basic one.
All right, thank you.
Tips for answering the data interpretation. They're grouped together, refer to the same table, graph, or data representation. They ask you to interpret or analyze the given data. They may be of multiple choice or numeric entry type. Again, scan the data presentation briefly to see what it's about, but don't spend too much time studying all the information because you probably don't need all of it, but an overall view is probably sufficient. Also, pay attention to the orders of magnitude, like billions, or in the other problem, we had thousands. Pay attention to the labels and so on. When graphical data presentations such as bar graphs and line graphs are shown with scales, you should read, estimate, or compare the quantities by sight or by measurement according to the corresponding scales. For example, you can use the relative sizes of bars or sectors to compare the quantities that they represent, but be aware of any broken scales of bars that do not start at 0. I'll try to show that in an example, because then they may not compare in ratio form very well. The questions are to be answered only on the basis of the data presented, so don't use other and everyday facts such as number of days in a year and so on, but don't bring in specialized information that you heard somewhere else. Only use the data and the information that's in the problem. Some of the questions, here's a question, and really it can be a question that a lot of people would misinterpret, or maybe not misinterpret, but calculate incorrectly. Notice that they're talking about these different stores. The percent changed from one year to another, 2006 to 7, and then the percent changed from 2007 to 2008. So like for store P, it increased by 10%, and then in the next year it decreased by 10%. Now in the question, the first question talks about that. If the dollar amount of sales for store P was $800,000 for 2006, what was the dollar amount in the store for 2008? And it's very tempting to think, well, it increased by 10% and dropped by 10%, so it didn't change. It must be the same. But if you think about what happens for 1 year, in the first year, it increases by 10%. So 10% of this 800,000 is 80,000. So the amount is 880,000. Then that amount decreases by 10%. So if it decreases by 10%, it's going to decrease by $88,000, dropping down to $792. So notice you dropped a bigger amount because you had 10% of a larger amount that was decreased. So the answer for this is actually B. And then also, we're talking in thousands of dollars, which they give all the answers in thousands, but if they didn't, make sure that you are aware of that if you're supposed to type an answer in. Notice in the second problem, we won't work through the whole thing. You can look through the answer, but it talks about giving your answer to the nearest 0.1%. So notice that they do the calculations and they have 1.08, and we want to change that to a percent. Well, this decimal value gets changed to a percent by multiplying by 100 or moving the decimal point over 2 places to 108, 0.69, and so on. Rounded to that 1/10 of a percent would be 108.7. Notice on number 3, it says indicate all such statements that are true. I won't read through the whole answer on that one, but just notice what was being asked on that one. And that's the last type of test according to those types that they give you. So again, there are different formats for the questions, and we went through all of those. Be aware of that, especially if you get to practice and do the practice tests before you actually get to the test, so that you know there are those different types of questions. I'm clicking on problem-solving steps, which is probably what you've heard in your life in regular math classes. Pretty much the same types of steps, maybe a few more, maybe not. But understand the problem read the problem, make sure you know what's important, what's not important. Carry out a strategy for solving the problem. Think of some way that you can solve that problem, if it's an equation or a table or a guess and check or whatever it is, and carry it out and then check your answer. And they just go through some more detail of each of those strategies. Down here, or those steps on solving the problem. Down here, strategies, there are no set rules applicable to all mathematics problems to determine the best strategy. And this is true. The more math that you do, you'll find out that there are some nice ways of solving certain types of problems, but problems in general, there are so many ways we can solve them, and some ways are better than other ways for certain types of problems. So you don't want to try to memorize a lot of strategies, but the more experience you have solving problems, the better you get at picking strategies that actually work. On this list down here, it says the first 4 strategies are translation strategies. One where representation of a mathematics problem is translated to another. These 4 strategies. But notice all the different strategies. We won't go through all of these, but all the different things you can do. Trial and error, making estimations, divide into cases, find a pattern, do some geometry, and so on. If you click on any one of these, I'll just click on one of these. It refers back, many of these at least, refer back to some of the questions that we saw a little earlier. And it talks about how they apply those strategies. Let me click on calculator. So this might answer the questions you asked me that I wasn't too sure of. Says for such you could use the calculator provided with the test. I don't know. I still don't see if it says about using a different calculator. Might have to read that in the instructions somewhere. Yeah, it almost seems like this is the one you have to use, but I can't remember that for sure. I won't go through the whole calculator with you, but notice it's just a regular 4-function calculator. It does give some instructions on using the memory, but unless you're really good with using the memory keys, you might not mess with that so much. But you do have the way of punching in numbers and changing the sign and so on. One of the difficulties, I think, with using this calculator, even though it's a simple calculator, is that some of you may have used calculators like the graphing ones, like a TI-84, where you type in the expression pretty much like you see it. Where on these calculators, you might have to do things backwards. Like if I want the square root of 36, I don't think I can, nope, I don't think it's going to let me manipulate it. I probably first have to type in 36 and then do the square root key. So it's backwards on some of the things that you might normally be doing otherwise on your calculator. It explains that here with order of operations and so on. Yeah, look at all the explanation on calculator. Just you do want to become familiar with it if you're going to use that. Okay, I want to, before I do the power prep, down here at the very bottom, and I think there's another way of getting to this information. It has these links for math review and then mathematical conventions. I showed you the Khan Academy, which gives some explanations and things like that. But here we have some PDFs of some information that can be useful to you. Let me go up the table of contents first. Table of contents for like arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and so on. It tells you what page you can find information on triangles, quadrilaterals, circles, or whatever it is. Data analysis, talking some about probability. Maybe you want to look up that. If I just jump down farther somewhere, you can see what's given to you on these pages. For example, rules of exponents. There's some examples, some of the rules. And then I think, if I remember right, I thought there were some practice problems. Let me go back to table of contents. I was thinking this is where they can give you a few practice problems too. Yeah, they do. At the end of the geometry exercises, once you get done with that explanation, they give you some exercises, then the answers. So that could possibly be helpful to you. The other PDF is on mathematical conventions, which are kind of the rules of mathematics. So again, the table of contents, geometry, geometric figures, coordinate system, data lists and sequences and so on, symbols and variables. Let me just scroll down a little further and show what some of this looks like. Oops, don't want to stop there. Well, let me go down here. For the geometry, it gives you some of the terminology. Remember I said terminology can be pretty important in answering the questions, knowing what they're even asking. Some of the conventions being the rules, what you're supposed to understand within this topic. Lines are assumed to be straight lines that extend in both directions without end. Angle measures are in degrees and are assumed to be positive and less than or equal to 360 degrees. Talk about closed figures down here, not closed, it's open. And this one's closed, but it's not convex. I mean, they're just telling you some of the different terminology for geometry. Let me get down a little further. Let's say graphing, the coordinate system and how to identify points. 2 across and 8 down would be the point 2, -8. And so on. So it just runs you through some of the things that you may not understand. The empty set sign for set notation, intersection of sets, union of sets. What does this stuff mean? If you haven't been around it, it might really help to look at those terms. X-intercept, Y-intercept, and so on. I mean, there's so much information that, depending on how much math you took and when you took it last, you could forget some of these things. So that's what the math conventions can do for you. And I thought they had that listed here also, but I don't see it on here. So let's look at, I'll look at strategies and tips just quickly. Then I want to go up to PowerPoint here a little bit later. We probably have seen quite a bit of what they've talked about or what we saw within the problems. But here, and again, if we click on quantitative reasoning, it might give us some more information on that. But here are some information that you want to read through just to become more familiar with the types of tests, some of the tips that they can give you. There's also for accessible formats. I'll let you look at that if you need to look at that. I'm going to click on Power Prep. The Power Prep is something that you'll have access to if you register for the test. And Power Prep, years ago, when I first started showing this presentation, Power Prep was something that I downloaded on my computer and I could show it off and students could get access to it and download it. It had a lot of this information that we've been looking at, the types of questions and practice questions and things like that. But it also has practice tests. But to get a hold of those, you have to register. And actually to get a hold of Power Prep. But notice they have some different information for you here for Power Prep. The test preview tool contains information to help familiarize yourself with the question types. That's probably a lot of what we looked at. It may be all that we looked at, but it might have that plus some more practice questions. Power Prep Online, 2 free practice tests that simulate the actual tests. This, I think, is so valuable to you. If you can take a test, I believe that years ago, I think they had one test that was like untimed, just to give you experience taking the test. And then the other one might be timed, or at least maybe you have the choice to time it. And that's really good to see if you're dedicating enough time to the questions, or if you're dedicating too much time to the questions, and so on. Power Prep Plus Online, 3 official practice tests sold separately. So this one almost looks like it's, yeah, this one cost you some money. This one here, I think 2 free practice tests would be a nice one to get a hold of. Down at the bottom, determine which product is best for you. So it gives you an idea of what you're shown within each Power Prep package. 2 analytical writing tests, 7 verbal reasoning questions, 11 quantitative reasoning questions, 2 full-time tests, option to take the practice test 1 under untimed conditions, and then 3 never before published full-length practice tests. That's really top of the line there. The scores, doesn't look like you get any feedback here. Here you have scores on these parts. Here you have scores within minutes. Correct answers, give you the answer key. Here they show you the correct answers. Explanations on the last ones, and so on. But I really recommend to you, if you can get into Power Prep and take the practice test after doing some of these other things first, that would be very beneficial to you. Do you have any questions? I know that was a quick run through, but hopefully I showed you where to find access to all of that information. Haley or Madison, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Let's check the chat. Nope, not yet. Okay. Do you want to go into ets.org and look around for a while with me staying around online in case you have some questions? Would you like to do that tonight, or do you just want to go and do that on your own?
I think I got the gist of it. I'm good to go on my own.
Okay. What about you, Madison?
Yeah, I'm the same.
Okay.
I think I did a good job. So.
Okay. So do you have any questions on what I showed? I know, like, I didn't show you much for content at all. I didn't go through all the solutions or anything like that, but I hope that I gave you an idea of what those questions look like. And I didn't go through the writing or verbal reasoning, but you can always go through those too, whether or not the other people who help you with this preparation go through those. They're available to you. And like you saw on Power Prep, there's information there. And then on the videos, like I said, if you need content explained to you, those Khan Academy videos are pretty good, and the practice problems.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Well, I think.
Dr.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for presenting tonight on Power Prep, software, and math. We really appreciate it, and we're glad to have you speaking to us again this year.
Okay, well, thanks for the invitation. I enjoy doing that. Also, Haley and Madison, if you have some questions for me, if you run into some problems and you think I might be able to help you with something, especially navigating through that site or something, my email is available. If you look in the math department, look at the faculty, and you'll see my email in there. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. But hopefully you can navigate this pretty well on your own and get what you need for to be successful on your test.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us tonight. Okay. Samuel, you're going to shut us down then?
He actually said that he was going to be unavailable for the rest of the Zoom.
Okay.
Because he has some homework to do. He is recording it, but he could crop the areas out, so this part won't be included in the video.
That'd be fine.
So, oh, sorry.
Where will he be posting? Like, will you be posting this video anywhere in case, like, I have to go back and look at it?
Yeah, we plan to post it on the. Do you have Facebook? It will be posted on there, I believe. And if you can't find it, I'm unsure exactly where we will post it. But if you can't find it, just email the Fort Hays Honor Society email, and it should be there.
Perfect.
Oh, Sammy will just we'll send out a direct link.
Oh,
Well, thank you.
okay. So have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Well, Liz, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. I do enjoy it. So hopefully they do well.
Yeah, I think